a faraway exotic land, sword fights, romance, political intrigue. What more could you want from a book? Hello everyone and welcome to Bound in Prose, the booktube channel for those very eclectic tastes in literature. I am your host Matt, and today I thought I'd talk about a book that I've already kind of discussed in my top 10 video, but since there's a new mini-series coming out, I thought I'd revisit it a little bit, and that is Shogun by James Clavell. So in my top 10 video, I put this as number 4 on my favorites list, so obviously I really enjoyed this book, and with it being that high, I thoroughly enjoyed this book, but I thought I'd just take a little time today to maybe delve a little bit further into it and discuss some of the things that I didn't in that top 10 video, so yeah. So for the first part of this review, I'm going to keep this rather spoiler-free, and then I'll give you a little spoiler warning, and I'll kind of chat about some specific scenes that I really enjoyed, and then I'll kind of wrap up and just give you my overall thoughts and opinions, which you can already tell I like this book. I love this book. So anyways, the story follows John Blackthorne, who is a English captain of a vessel, and his ship and his crew are shipwrecked and marooned onto the island of Japan. And so immediately they are taken prisoner, thrown underground in this pit with fish guts, and held there for a couple of days. And then as they sort of get out and get immersed into the culture, John Blackthorne is taken under the wing of Lord Toranaga, who is one of these military warlords that's vying for power against this other very powerful Lord Ishido. And they are fighting to become the Shogun, which is like the ultimate military mastermind, lord, ruler, that sort of thing. So as the book goes, John Blackthorne is immersed into the culture and questions his own culture and morality, and really comes to love and appreciate this culture in feudal Japan. Now, this is a sweeping epic, and on the back it says Shakespearean. I think that is a perfect description of this book. This book encapsulates so many different aspects of Japanese culture, morality. It is an extremely immersive read. And if you're like a big fan of fantasy, I say that this type of like world building, even though feudal Japan was real, I feel like this does such a great job of giving you so many details and really letting you like know what it might have been like living back in this time. Now, I know a lot of people say that this is not the most historically accurate book, and I will get into some of that here in a bit, but I think that if you are a big fan of like epics, epic fantasy, that kind of thing, even though this is not fantasy, I think that you'll still be able to pick up Shogun and enjoy it. So there is a list of characters, entirely too long to go through every single one of them, but some of the main characters are obviously John Blackthorne, who is our protagonist, Lord Toranaga, who is the lord that kind of like takes him in and helps to train him in the ways of like Japanese culture and the politics and the language. And the way he does that is by assigning one of his servants, Mariko, to basically be John's tutor. So those are like our three main characters. And then the big baddie of the book is Lord Ishido, who holds a lot of power already and who is basically fortified in one of the cities. And so there's a lot of political maneuvering. There are a lot of action sequences. And then a lot of the book is John learning the language, kind of being, it's almost like he's like getting healthier, like with the way that, they eat, the kinds of food that he is served. He starts taking baths again. And so he really comes to like appreciate and fall into this lifestyle. So before I get into any like major spoilers or anything, one of the other I have seen this called by some people like a white savior novel, which I know what that means, but I did not get that with this book. At no point to me, or at least very few points, and John is more so like a chess piece, and he is constantly watched by like Mariko and his handlers and Lord Toranaga. And even though he does come to like learn their ways, it's at like no point in the book do I remember that he's like, well, I need to teach these people how to do certain things because they are savages and I have to show them the real ways of like warfare and culture. I mean, maybe a little bit towards the beginning, but that's to be expected because he's of a different culture, and they do kind of show up and think that the Japanese are lesser than, or more savage than the people of England. But as the novel goes on, John kind of questions that and really comes to more appreciate living with them, and kind of doesn't want to really like go back to England as much as he did. You get the feeling. I know that he wants to like return his crew, and there is a lot of like getting his ship back and being able to go and opening up channels of trade and that kind of thing. But it's not like, well, I need to show them how to use rifles because this swordplay is like ancient and they need to stop doing it that way. Let me show them the way. There's actually a scene where after he's been away from his crew for some time, he's reunited with them, and he's shocked by how dirty and gross they are, and he's thinking back to his life in England, and he's just kind of like, my wife and our dirty like house, and I just can't imagine like going back to her and us living in this filth that we did. And now that I realize how bad we stink and all this kind of stuff, like it kind of opens his eyes as to the type of life that he was living, and he appreciates his baths. And it actually, like, as the book progressed, he takes a lot of those baths and he can't live without them. I mean, he loves to smell good. They put like perfumes and rose petals and everything in the baths. And so anyways, so I don't know, I didn't get white savior from this book. I mean, obviously he plays like a big part, but it's Lord Toranaga and Mariko that are really like the masterminds that know what's going on, and it's them that are the catalysts for like the final battle and the actual like victories that they have. So I don't know, if you thought this was a white savior novel, I would love to know why you think that. I mean, I could be wrong, so please let me know. I'm always willing to hear opinions. So anyway, okay, now I'm going to talk about some specific scenes. So if you don't want any spoilers, go ahead and click off the video or skip ahead to like the last minute or two to get my final thoughts. So anyways, these are just some scenes that I remember that kind of are still fresh for me. I read this book last year, so a lot of it is still pretty fresh, but I just want to talk about like some of the scenes that I really enjoyed. The first one is when John and Lord Toranaga, they're on a ship together, and Lord Toranaga has become impressed with the way that John dives off of the ship. He does this really like nice form on his diving, and Lord Toranaga is basically like, show me how to do that, teach me how to do that. And John does, and Toranaga spends some time getting it right, but he ultimately does learn how to do this dive really well. And it doesn't take him like a long time, but I remember like John being like impressed with the discipline that Toranaga shows in like learning this new skill and learning it correctly. But I thought that was really interesting, and it's one of the first times in the book where they really like connect, and so it kind of helps like John sort of like buy into like Toranaga is a good person and is like respectable and honorable. So I really enjoyed that. There is a very humorous scene to me later on in the book where they take John to, let's say, a mistress of pleasure, hintity hint, wink wink. And John, you know, with his religious background in England, is very uncomfortable. And he goes because it's this honor, you know, that they're trying to bestow upon him to like be able to go and actually experience this, because not everybody could afford it. And so anyways, the mistress that they go and they see, she can tell that he's very uncomfortable, and she's like bringing out all of these objects and things to kind of like pique his interest and, you know, make him more comfortable and willing, you know, to participate. And he's just so uncomfortable. It's so funny. That scene, I just laughed. And yeah, I remember that one. There's a scene where it's an action scene where they've been, I believe it was to see Lord Ishido, and they kind of realize that he's not really wanting them to leave. He's trying to subtly like take them captive and make it to where they can't get away, and they have to fight their way back to the ship. And that's a really like fun action-packed sequence. And then major spoilers here, but the ending of the book is the climax is perfect, and Mariko ends up like sacrificing herself in this display that gets, you know, the army, or the, you know, Lord Toranaga's people to like fight and actually and win the victory over Lord Ishido. The ending, it has like all the samurai and the ninjas, and they're battling in like this feudal Japan castle. It's so cool. It's so good. And so, yeah, those are like some of the major scenes. And there are plenty more, but those were like some of the ones that really stuck out to me. So now let's talk a little bit about historical accuracy. So I have seen people say that this is not the most historically accurate. I'm not an expert on Japanese history, Japanese literature, Japanese culture. I do really enjoy reading books in that setting, but I don't want to sit here and pretend like I know enough to be able to, you know, pick out all of the inaccuracies. One of the things that I have heard is that samurai were not as, I don't want to say willing, but we're not made to commit seppuku, which is ritual unaliving, as we have to say nowadays. So yeah, it's like in the book, if you looked at Lord Ishido wrong, like you had to commit seppuku, and if you spoke out of turn, you had to commit seppuku. And I've heard that that's not entirely accurate. That was more so when you really needed to preserve your honor. Like you would commit that, maybe like if you didn't do something right in battle, or you really messed up, really messed up, that you would have to do that. But I don't know that for sure. So anyways, that being said, I would go into this knowing that a lot of it is probably fairly accurate. The general setting and ideas are probably fairly accurate, but I would also go into this a little bit like you would an epic fantasy novel. Like, take it for what it is, know that this is a piece of fiction. It is a really fun, thoroughly engaging piece of fiction, but ultimately don't read this as like a textbook. Okay, spoilers are done. So ultimately, if it's not apparent already, I love Shogun. I was a little worried picking it up. It's chunky, and you know, I didn't know going into it if it might be sort of dry, if, you know, it's a little bit older of a novel. I didn't know if there would be like super long stretches that were really boring, but I can say with absolute certainty and honesty that there was not a chapter, not a page, not a paragraph of this book where I was not thoroughly engaged. I loved every aspect of it. From the first page where they get, you know, shipwrecked, or the first chapter where they get shipwrecked, to the very ending where, you know, Lord Toranaga is, you know, giving his last thoughts, I'll just say, since I'm already done with spoilers. You know, even the scenes where they're eating, you know, the scenes where Clavell is describing the different types of foods, and then, you know, John's gonna go take a bath and describes the different sort of like plants and scents and everything. This was a novel that invoked all of the senses that there wasn't a section of it where I was kind of like, can we just get through the, like, I loved Shogun. So I know the miniseries is coming out. If you are interested, I know a lot of people just go ahead and watch the miniseries, but if you're like my brother Justin, he wants to read this before the miniseries comes out. He has been avoiding spoilers. He has been avoiding trailers, anything to do with it, because he wants to read this before he watches it. So I highly recommend doing it that way. There are some books where it's like, you know, just go ahead and watch the miniseries. Like, the book is good, but blah, blah, blah. But no, I think, like, if you are going to experience the story of Shogun, read the book first. I know it's a lot to get through, but I blew through this. There wasn't a single time where I felt bogged down. So I recommend reading the book first. Seriously, for me, Shogun is almost as perfect a book as you can get. And that's going to do it for today, folks. Thank you so much for joining me, talking about one of my favorite books that I have read. If this is your first time here with me, please like, comment, subscribe. I'm always happy to hear from folks. Yeah, and so anyways, I hope that everyone is doing well. I hope that you continue to do well. I hope to see you back here. And that's going to do it. Happy reading, everyone. You're still here? Go pick it up.